Hello and welcome back to What Now on the Threshold of Life, Death, and Grief. I'm here in our studio
with Red Keating
and David Kennedy.
And I'm Julie Brown. And it's just the three of us here for this recording. And we decided to do something very different with this episode. All three of us are lovers of poetry, literature, music, art, and I think really appreciate what it can bring and how it can support us in this realm when we talk about issues of life and death. And so we wanted to bring some of that into the podcast.
Yeah, artists help us talk about and express those things that might be really hard to find the words for. Of course, I'm a music guy, so I am sort of drawn to lyrics. But those folks that are able to take those sort of complex feelings and complex emotions and put them into a form that we can sit down and read or listen to or see, maybe through a painting, that really speak to us. That they cut, some of them, it cuts right through and enters into the heart and mind in a way that maybe we struggle to find the words for it. Not unlike I might be struggling right now to find some words, but I think people know what I'm talking about, that sense that an artist can sort of catch the essence sometimes in a way that we find difficult.
And I think for people who are listening or reading those pieces, it's so different than, say, an academic paper, which is what you were kind of getting at. This cuts right down to the depth of who we are, our heart, our soul. And often those words, and it's funny, I don't know, when I'm reading, sometimes it's just a phrase or a sentence or a paragraph that just kind of captures those pieces that I find difficult. And so language and words and music, powerful part of both the journey of our life and the journey of the end of our life, I think.
So when we came up with this idea to do this recording, we assigned ourselves the homework that we would each go away and find a few selections. We didn't tell each other. There were kind of no bounds around that. And then we have gathered here and shared what we are going to share with all of our listeners. So I'm going to start this conversation. And the moment we decided on this topic, this was the first one that came to mind. It's a poem by John O'Donohue. And I don't know if you remember this, David, but you sent me this poem when I was diagnosed with cancer. And there are some lines in it that have continued to reverberate for me over these last couple of years. So I'm going to read it and then we'll have a chat about it. So it's called A Blessing for a Friend on the Arrival of Illness. Now is the time of dark invitation beyond a frontier that you did not expect. Abruptly, your old life seems distant. You barely noticed how each day opened a path through fields never questioned, yet expected deep down to hold treasure. Now your time on earth becomes full of threat. Before your eyes, your future shrinks. You lived absorbed in the day-to-day so continuous with everything around you that you could forget you were separate. Now this dark companion has come between you. Distances have opened in your eyes. You feel that against your will, a stranger has married your heart. Nothing before has made you feel so isolated and lost. When the reverberations of shock subside in you, may grace come to restore you to balance. May it shape a new space in your heart to embrace this illness as a teacher who has come to open your life to new worlds. May you find in yourself a courageous hospitality towards what is difficult, painful, and unknown. May you use this illness as a lantern to illuminate the new qualities that will emerge in you. May your fragile harvesting of this slow light help you release whatever has become false in you. May you trust this light to clear a path through all the fog of old unease and anxiety until you feel a rising within you, a tranquility profound enough to call the storm to stillness. May you find the wisdom to listen to your illness. Ask it why it came, why it chose your friendship, where it wants to take you, what it wants you to know, what quality of space it wants to create in you, what you need to learn to become more fully yourself. that your presence may shine in the world. May you keep faith with your body, learning to see it as a holy sanctuary, which can bring this night wound gradually towards the healing and freedom of dawn.
John O'Donohue is one of my favorites, actually, and a real Irish Celtic spirituality. Unfortunately, he died rather suddenly, unexpectedly, a few years ago. But yes, that one. What is it, Julie? That that kind of caught you in that one?
Well, so much. I mean, when it opens, now is the dark time of dark invitation, beyond a frontier that you did not expect. Abruptly, your old life seems distant. And I know the first time I read that, I was like, yep, that's exactly what it is. That I'm in a new frontier. I'm in new land. And I lived my life not thinking that he says, a path through fields never question. I never question. You just put one foot in front of the other. And then when illness arrives, all of a sudden you are pushed into a new frontier. But what really stayed with me, and I journaled around this, and it, obviously I couldn't go into meaning making for a really long time. But I really just let it I kept reading this poem over and over and over again. But it was may you find the wisdom to listen to your illness, ask it why it came, why it chose your friendship, where it wants to take you and what it wants you to know. And so I just, that softened something in me, even the word friendship. Yeah, so why did it choose me? So instead of saying, why me? And why is this happening to me? It's like, what is it here and what does it have to teach me? And I actually started journal entries with those questions. Is where does it want to take me? And what does it want me to know? And why did it come for me? And I just kind of let that percolate over time. I just think there's so much wisdom here. He captures the shock of being diagnosed, and then he captures also the meaning making that we start to do to try to find the ground underneath our feet again.
I think what I loved about it too was we phrase illness as enemies, and we resist that, and I understand, and that's our first response. But that call to friendship is an interesting approach, right? Because it does, as you say, it forces you to think about it differently. And it's not that we want that or welcome, but it's here. So how do we approach that? Right.
Yeah.
And
not be at war with it.
Not be at war, that language, and we did one on all that negative language. So that's what in his, in the writing of that, that's what struck me too, and why I thought, wow, this is something. It's a long journey. It's a process.
Yes.
You're right. You can't meaning make immediately out of that, but it invites us to that.
It's a time of dark invitation.
Well, it's funny because as you were reading, I was writing, and we're just surrounded by paper down here right now. But I wrote, "Dark companion, listen to your illness and friendship," as the things that jumped out. And I was thinking, wow, that's what jumped out for me in this moment. I could probably read this poem in another month or two, and something else would jump out at me. And I think that's, again, the power of the word is what you're ready to receive is what you'll get from it. And you might get ready to, next time you're reading it, something else jumps out at you. And the first listen through on that poem, that concept of a dark companion being a friend, and that your illness has something to bring to your life that isn't just all doom and gloom. And if you listen to it, there could be something to learn, and how maybe it is easier to receive that through a poem and the written word than to have someone sit down in front of you and say, well, no, it isn't all that bad. What
are you going to learn from this?
Yeah. What gifts has your cancer brought you? But that the poem sits there, and it's not judgmental, and you take from it what you need from it in the moment. you know?
There's a softness to that. Yeah.
And a history, I immediately, I'm just sitting here thinking about Rumi's words on the guest house.
Yes.
Welcome, open it up, welcome whoever comes your way.
That's right.
And there's that idea of, so it's an ancient thing too. This isn't just a modern approach to how we deal with struggle and suffering and illness. But here's an ancient invitation that our lives are open.
Yeah.
I think the key word there is invitation, right? Because some people never send back an RSVP to that invitation. There can be a battle and a struggle right to the bitter end. And maybe that's the point of the journey, is to continue to fight. But other times the point of the journey is there may be other things to learn, other things that might enlighten us in the process.
Well, and it's just that idea of grace around how two things can be true, because I'm sharing this to say I worked with this poem, but that didn't mean that I didn't battle and rail against it and still say, why me, and all of those things too. And then could have these moments where I could fall into this place and work with this, but then be catapulted out of it, right? So
just having the option, just saying there is more than one way. And I agree with you. I don't think it's 100% each way, but there's moments when you can fully feel that.
So thank you for letting me share it. Thank you for sharing it with me originally, David.
Yeah.
Okay, over to you.
I have one, a very short one, but this is one from Douglas Smith, and he wrote a book on spiritual healing, he calls it. And I have done a course with him, and I really appreciate some of the things. I have 2 or 3 I'll probably read through our time today. But this one is what he calls a prayer for courage for someone who is dying. I pray for a peaceful death. But if there be no peace, please let me have courage. I pray for a death without pain. But if there be pain, please let me have courage. I pray for a death where there is no disfigurement. But if there be disfiguring, please let me have courage. I pray for a good death. But if it not be good, please let me have courage. And I think the piece that I appreciate there is the idea that we cannot control what happens in this process, but we control our responses to what happens to us. And nothing confronts us with a greater intensity than our own awareness of our own dying. And what is it that we look for in that? What is it that we choose? And I like this idea of courage, which doesn't, courage for what? Courage to do what? Courage to meet no matter what comes my way.
It's funny, I think in my head, I use the word strength, but strength and courage could be interchangeably, but just like, geez, that a prayer is just, boy, I have the strength to be able to, cope with, deal with, get through whatever the challenge, and it's a short prayer in the way this is a short prayer, but strength and courage, as we talked about in that other podcast, if we use that too much, you got to be strong. What happens if? But I like this because if not that, if I can't be strong, at least give me the courage to cope with what I'm dealt. If I can't control it, at least give me the strength, the courage, the grace to be able to accept it and live through it.
It's that juxtaposition between our fears and those, those are the things we are afraid of. If that which we are afraid of comes, what's our response? And I think this response of courage or strength, or in light of it, is a wonderful way to look.
And that acknowledgement of not necessarily having control. We can have a desire and a wish for those things. To not have disfigurement, to not have pain. But what happens if I don't get that wish? How do I move through that experience?
It's lovely. I'm just, I've heard you say it before, and I just absorbing it, because I do just think like there's so much wisdom in that. It's the acceptance. We can't control life and we can't control death. But how do we approach it and be with these things? Courage. Yeah, which is not the absence of fear, right?
Right, exactly. Yeah. It's not the absence of it.
Over to you, Red.
And I think, Julie, you were saying, trust because, we've got papers in front of us here, trust that you know which one to read when the time is right. And I do think this one fits into this spot. This is called Washing of the Water by Peter Gabriel. And of course, mine are all lyrics because of my penchant to like lyrics and music. But
you could sing it, Red.
Well, and it's really hard to read lyrics and not just say them like a song. So it sounds strange when you say it as a poem. But this is sort of the way I read this is from the perspective of someone who knows that they're dying. And it goes like this. It's Washing of the Water by Peter Gabriel. River, river, carry me on. Living river, carry me on to the place where I come from. So deep, so wide, will you take me on your back for a ride? If I should fall, would you swallow me deep inside? River, show me how to float. I feel like I'm sinking down. Thought that I could get along, but here in this water, my feet won't touch the ground. I need something to turn myself around. Going away, away toward the sea. River deep, can you lift me up and carry me? Oh, roll on through the heartland till the sun has left the sky. River, river, carry me high, till the washing of the water makes it all right. Let your waters reach me, let she reach me tonight. Letting go. It's so hard the way it's hurting now, to get this love untied. So tough to stay with this thing, 'cause if I follow through, I face what I deny. I get those hooks out of me, and I take out the hooks that I sunk deep inside you. Kill that fear of emptiness, loneliness I hide. Oh, river, river, river running deep, bring me something that will let me get some sleep. In the washing of the water, will you take it all away? Bring me something to take this pain away. I just have a very deep respect for the way Peter Gabriel writes a lyric. But I like the idea of the process or the journey of dying as being sort of taken away to another place by a river. And I mean, river, it can be a peaceful ride. It can be a rough ride. It can have rapids. It can have smooth, soft spots. But I like how he identifies the untying of love that has to happen when someone's leaving. To get this love untied, so tough to stay with this thing, 'cause if I follow through, I face what I deny. And I just think that's such a strong, powerful process that has to be achieved in the letting go. Mm-hmm. And there's nothing like being rushed away in water. When you have no control, you are being washed away. Yeah. And
it is kind of like how a current will come along, just like the body will move in, like into the dying process. Again, we don't get to control that, right? Just like we don't get to control the current of the river.
Yeah.
The river just keeps flowing. And we can fight the current.
Yeah.
We can try to, manage it, control it, or we can river.
Yes, we can lift our feet and flow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because if you keep fighting, it just wears you down. Mm-hmm. Right? It makes you more tired if you're just constantly fighting that flow.
Yeah, that was the piece that that hit me there, was that idea of the process. And I love that line, as you pointed out there, the untying of that. And then the other one is, I take the hooks out that I have sunk deeply in. Mm-hmm. Others, there's a sense of the recognition that is a deep attachment. A hook is a real connection, right? Mm-hmm. And there is that letting go, that detachment that we go through in there, and it's not easy.
Yeah,
it's a process and a difficult one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And that idea of his feet not being able to touch the ground, I like that in terms of, I've lived my life on solid ground, and now all of a sudden I don't have the grounding that I had. I'm in a process that I am no longer in control of.
Isn't that true? Yeah. That's a great imagery.
The groundlessness that we feel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm sinking down,
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember, when my dad died, he talked about, I can just feel the energy leaving my body. Everything is heavy. He would hold out his hands and he'd say, I can feel it. I can feel the energy leaving.
But water is certainly one of those pieces that is often used in this description of our journeys and things, and a river and the wideness of that. the idea of it leads us somewhere. We don't know, but there's someone with us who knows sometimes. We have that idea of that journey. But water is often a very important piece of it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was just thinking, grief has its own current to it too, right? And one of the things that often we struggle with so much in grief is humans is like we're trying to control the current of it, right? And it's when we just allow ourselves to be where we are, wherever we are in the current, in the river, right? And stop trying to fight it and control it and think we should be in a different place in the river than where we are is often just like what you said, David, about your reading is like, just how do we respond to ourselves in this? Can we make friends with the river, with the current?
Yep.
Over to you, David.
Well, I think maybe we could read a couple around the grief side then, because again, I think when we find ourselves in grief and in that a world that we're not used to, or a world that has suddenly surrounded us, I think often again, words of poets or words of writing that can pierce some of that outward shock and armor. And sometimes it's, as I said before, it's not necessarily a whole piece of writing. It's words in there, it's phrases, it's ideas that, and that's enough, right? That's the whole thing. It doesn't have to be the whole poetry or writing that sticks with us, but something in there. So this is another one of my favorite authors, Richard Wagamus, and in his book, Embers. And he writes, missing someone is feeling a piece of your heart gone astray. Sure, it keeps beating, and sure, you keep breathing, but there's a gap in the rhythm of it, and in the rhythm of everyday things around you. You seem to move a little less gracefully, but you still move, and that's the critical thing. Because missing someone doesn't mean things grind to a halt. Instead, it means you move out of gratitude for the gift of their presence in your life. You move to keep experiencing, to keep confronting life head on, so that your connection to the world allows you to be more human, more alive, and more real. And I think I like that one because it pictures this idea of there's something missing in us, but life still needs to go on. And that how we do that, if we can, and we're going right back to your first one there, if we can allow what is happening to us, whether it's grief or illness, but in this case, grief, if we can allow that to somehow change us in a positive way, in a way that allows us to be better humans. And I think that's the key there. And that we connect with the world. And we all know that. And that's what people, in grief, they say to us, nothing's the same. Everything's changed. My world is totally different.
Yeah.
And but it doesn't mean we stop moving. That's the key.
Yeah. It can often feel like you've been sidelined or put in the penalty box, that life is happening out there and that you aren't a part of it. But you're always a part of it. What was the term, Julie? I am of the nature. We are always of the nature. And even if we feel like we're in the side box or the penalty box or on the sidelines, that's still life, right? And that's life in grief.
Way.
Yeah.
That's life. That's the current.
Yeah.
That's the part of the river.
And it's okay to feel time and space and relationship differently when you're in that place. Because it is different. I was talking with someone at work, and we were talking about how when you are in hospice and you have someone who you love dying, time stops being a thing. Like you don't feel time the same way. Every moment is just this moment. And that the world going on outside is following a schedule, 9 to 5, whatever. And it's just like all time is lost. And so we talked about it as a foggy time or a foggy space in which all the things that we're used to stop being, but they still are, right? And we are still a part of it, but it feels so different. It's like we're shunted into a different lane almost.
And to re-engage, I think that's how does one re-engage back into the world when that experience, and it's true, that does it to us in grief, and we're suddenly there, and yet we need to get back into whatever world we need to find ourselves in. So that re-engaging again, we are aware that we're different, but we're also, I don't know how you have found it, but it's kind of like we're surprised that other people aren't, that they're not there, right? That
Right.
we feel like, oh, you shouldn't be like that. You should
Yes.
know about this,
Yes,
right?
you should know about me and my pain
Yeah.
and my suffering right now, but you seem oblivious and you're just carrying on with your life, right?
I remember when my dad died, and I think I mentioned it very early in the morning up at PRHC. So afterwards, when I was going back home, probably about 8 o'clock in the morning, and I stopped at Tim Hortons to get a coffee. I don't know why, I just did. And I go through the drive-through, and this young lady gave me my coffee, and she said, "And have a good day." and it was that sense of, I wanted to tell her what had just happened. I wanted her to see my world. It was hard for me to be in her world
Right.
at that moment.
Right.
And it was like, no, you need to come into my world at this moment. But of course, that wouldn't have been fair either. But it's always stayed with me how that reintegration back in. And what's different about me? Do I allow that to be a more permanent piece in the good ways? Or do I just simply, after a little while, forget all about it?
Right.
Well, that reintegration piece, it just reminds me of, so often those that are grieving feel like they're being pushed back into the other world way too fast, way too intensely. Especially if you have people that are saying, well, come on, it'd be good for you if you went out, or, and that idea that people are in fix-it mode, or maybe they feel overstimulated going out, but just that reintegration often has to come very slowly, especially when we're in intense grief. For quite a while, we're trying to find our way around how much of that can we actually even tolerate. But of course, the judgment often is I should be able to just reintegrate. But actually reintegrating it's a really long process.
And I think it's good to reinforce that there is no timeline set that you have to have it done by this time or something is off, right? So that you are allowed to use the time and take the time that it takes for you. And like you said, sometimes people feel pressure from others, and it's just like, I guess the message out to others is let people go through their own process, because that's what they need to do, and not because it's what you want them to do to make you feel comfortable or you think it's good for them. Allow people their time and space, because if they're pushed, they're going to miss something that they were supposed to find in that journey.
The other thing about that piece is the idea, at least, that we have to change the way we're with people. So missing someone physically, missing them in the way in which we have connected, doesn't mean they're not with us. And that, when he talked about, we have to make that change from them being physically here to them being present with us in a different way. And we carry that. And again, I think the three of us have talked about this before, but the idea of, which I think is very Freudian, of simply making a cut and never having to think about that person again, and trying to get your life as if that's in the past and you don't need that person anymore. That's just not true. That we find ways to carry that person with us differently now.
And that often takes a great deal of work. And I find that often when people are in really acute grief, which, to your point, Red, can be whatever time amount it is, I find people often can't make contact with how they carry that person. I had someone say that to me once, because I guess I said something about, like, your dad is still with you. You carry him with you. And she said to me, like, a year later, I didn't know what you meant when you said that, but I do now. I can feel him, or I can hear him, I can feel him, I can connect with the essence of him in moments. But in the acuity of grief, sometimes it's hard to make that contact. And for those that are trying to make that happen, again, that's just not where we're at. Yeah.
I'm going to jump in with a wee Peter Gabriel thing here again. I won't do the whole thing, but I think what the first bit of a song by Peter Gabriel called I Grieve sort of hits on that. The lyrics are like this: "It's only 1 hour ago. It was all so different then. There's nothing that has really sunk in. It looks like it always did. this flesh and bone, it's just the way you were tied in. Now there's no one home. I grieve for you, you leave me. So hard to move on, still loving what's gone. They say life carries on. And, it does, but who are they? Who are they to say, in this moment that life carries on? It does. But
and
it doesn't. Yes. It does, and it feels stopped. It's full stop because you're still loving what's gone. Right?
That was beautiful.
That's a great song.
David, I think you had one about caregiving you were going to share with us, because we want to make sure we...
Yeah, because I think our podcast encompasses all these pieces. Dying and grief are not just one individual. They involve so many different areas, and we did a whole session on caregiving. This is one that I love to use when I do seminars and talks. And when we do hospice training, this is one that I like to use because I think it just captures a very healthy, positive way in which we approach our work as caregivers, whether that's professionally or whether it's volunteer or family or whatever. Again, it's one of Douglas Smith's, and he has two of them. He has a morning prayer and an evening prayer for caregivers. The morning prayer goes like this. As I begin this new day, let me have the courage and strength to face what lies ahead. Let me practice tolerance and patience. Let me reveal empathy and love. Let me offer sustenance and hope. And let me have the wisdom to know when I need to step forward and when I need to step back. I ask all of this so that when I come to the end of this day, I might rest, having known that my time and energy have been wanted and needed. Yes, I'm asking all of this for my own sake, but I'm also asking for the sake of another. And then he goes on for the evening prayer, and at the end of the day, he suggests this. I give thanks for the courage and strength that has carried me through this day. I give thanks for whatever tolerance and patience I've been able to practice. I give thanks for whatever empathy and love I've been able to reveal. I give thanks for whatever sustenance and hope I've been able to offer. I give thanks at the conclusion of this day and into this night for having been needed and wanted. Let me rest with a thankful body, mind, and spirit. Let me rest so that I might greet tomorrow with renewed courage and strength. I give thanks for rest.
I give thanks for rest. Yeah.
I wish I was so thoughtful. That just made me think of being to be more reflective and to be more present in my day, as opposed to just feeling running by it or running in it or being run by it even. To stop to even have those thoughts. It just brings a sense of calm.
Well, and it's interesting, Red, because for a period of my life, work time, there was, for a year or so, I would read that before I would go on the way to work, I would stop somewhere, usually down Little Lake by the water. And I would just spend a few moments and read that. And again, remind myself. And I think what I liked about it was the idea of, and the wording is there, let me practice this, let me reveal this, and let me offer this, right? So what is it that we can practice in our own way? What is it we can show people by the way in which we live? And what is it we offer to people? And the things we offer, I love that idea of sustenance and hope, rather than, I've got the answers for you, or I've got this and you need. It's this idea of, what is it that can feed you, and what is it gives you hope? I mean, and what a great reminder. You're right, and it is a great reminder as we go about our day that the way in which we operate does reveal things. It does practice stuff, and we are offering things. But to have that intentionality, I think, can be good. And that's true for every caregiver. I think people who are caring for others and before they start that work, it's not just about the physical things they can do. It's the way in which we do things that can be so helpful.
Mm-hmm. As I read and hear both of these, there's a softness, right, in this. Like there's a reverence for the work, for this revealing, for this offering, and for the work of caregiving that so often is invisible. And I find myself, maybe it's because some of the conversations I had today with two bereaved people who are in caregiving roles, I would love to add a line. Mm-hmm. Not that I think the words of Julie Brown should ever interfere with this artist, but I would love to add something like, when he talks about tolerance and patience, I'd love to add, and may I offer myself compassion and forgiveness for the times when I wasn't.
Wow.
Because, and again, I think this is the conversations I've had today, these bereaved people who can only now focus on those moments when they weren't, because we can't be all the time.
Yep.
Yeah.
And,
wow. That's good.
But I love what it's really speaking to is the intention that we want to bring through to caregiving. And his words are soft, and it's the intention of, may I have tolerance and patience, may I have courage and strength, but not that I will be that all the time, because we can't be.
Yeah. It reminds me, I handed you guys when we were that other Richard Wagame's. This one is really reminding me of that. I think it's on the right-hand side of the page.
The truth is that I have physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, and moral limitations. But physically, I want to be healthy enough to do good work. Mentally, I want to be clear so that I can let go of thoughts that do not serve me. Emotionally, I want to be aware of my feelings so that I can surrender those that do not empower me. Spiritually, I want to walk in awe, wonder, respect, and humility through this universe. Morally, I want to be a human being I can be proud of. I don't need to know what perfect looks like, only better. I can move gracefully towards better every day.
Yeah.
That's Richard Wagame.
Yeah. Those morning and evening prayers reminded me of that in terms of caregiving, in that sense of you don't have to be perfect. You just have to bring what is your best today.
Yeah.
Right.
And my best today may mean that I am impatient.
Yes.
Or I'm tired, or I was short.
Yeah. And you may be better or not tomorrow.
That's right.
But if you genuinely come with your best today and try with what you've got today, that's what matters.
And I think, again, making full circles, we need these reminders. And sometimes, as you said, Red, we just kind of push our way through and we wake up and we go to work and we do this or we have that. But sometimes these things can slow us down, right? And I think especially the work involved of living and dying, and the work involved in grief, and the work involved in caregiving, I think there's a sense in which we can get on a treadmill in those things. And I know even in my own life as a professional, we can lose that sense of softness if we don't, pay attention. And it's these things, it's these writings for me that often cause me to stop and say, okay, let me just soak this a bit and let me think about this.
I just love the fact that you use that as kind of like a ritual for yourself for work. I feel just to take that pause and just to offer that to yourself is such an act of deep self-caring, I think. I think that's what self-care really looks like.
It's wonderful to be stopped in your tracks by beauty, as opposed to a wall or an accident or a loud noise, to be stopped and made to wonder and be in awe. It's a wonderful way to stop.
And it is. And people could say that to you 10 times throughout the day and it wouldn't matter. But somehow in the moment when you're reading it like that, I mean, I'll never forget there's a Lucy Shaw, who's she writes beautiful poetry, lives in BC and Washington. She kind of went back and forth. She taught out there, I think, at Regent College. Anyway, I never forget years ago reading one of her poems, and it has stayed with me in a way that other things haven't, right? And which I think is the strength and gift of this. But in her poem, she talks about getting to the top of the ladder. And she has that imagery through her words. There's no pictures, but words present pictures, right? And I think poetry presents pictures to us. Music presents pictures. And she talks about when you realize, you're at the top of the ladder, the generation above you, your parents, your grandparents, they all die, and suddenly you're next. Mm-hmm. And I remember how that
And what's at the top of the ladder?
Yeah, you're at the top of the ladder. And what's there? What's next?
There's no more rungs to climb.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I honestly, it's got to be 20 years ago that I first read that poem. Mm-hmm. And yet that has never left me because it had a way of confronting me in a way that, words didn't have that same power. So I think, it's a combination. Maybe I was ready to hear it. Maybe the words were there to say the right way. But whatever it is, it stuck with me.
Mm-hmm.
I think you're right. It's the imagery, the power that the word has, or even if it is an image that's to stick, those things have a tendency to find a place in our memory where we can access them again and really sort of, like you say, speak to us. That image stayed with you, and that, again, sometimes more power in that than someone saying, you're next.
Exactly.
You're the next generation,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
And for me, the lyrics are always mixed with music, so the music stays, and it makes the lyrics easier to remember. And so those things, you get to then carry them with you, in a way that is personal and private and able to be shared.
Yeah, because life is more than just the intellect, right? Yeah. It's more than information.
Yeah,
we are,
and maybe that's what we're really getting at, is that life is more than intellect.
Mm-hmm.
And the mystics and the poets and the lyricists and the musicians and the painters, they know that, and they're trying to capture that through their art. It's more than the intellect.
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking of all the things I could have brought with me.
I know.
I'm thinking of a lot of Rumi.
I know.
And going to sleep and that idea of again the imagery that poetry. I remember as a kid in school I hated poetry because it all had to rhyme, right? And so you think about getting the line and getting it to rhyme, but I think if we think in the broader context of poetry, prose, and writing, and this deep sense of imagery, and it is imagery. I think that's the goal of that, is to make those words be seen, not just heard, or felt, and not just read.
Yeah, I think it's important for us to speak in imagery. I always say I will carry an image home with me much faster if who's ever speaking speaks with imagery, who speaks graphically, not graphically, creates a painting or a picture with metaphor in my head, and I'll remember that,
right.
Because it creates that image that you just have to look at it and you can see it all, and it's much more easily remembered, and again cuts through straight to the heart, maybe a little bit more.
If I may, I'll offer maybe my last reading as we start to wrap up. I probably, if we hadn't interviewed Vinny Ferraro, I probably would have brought the 5 Remembrances, but because he did a far better job talking about it than I would have. I had something I wanted to read by Ram Dass, who is a teacher of our times. He has also died, but he has this excerpt from his book, Polishing the Mirror, How to Live from Your Spiritual Heart. He writes, "Death is another moment. If you're not peaceful today, you probably won't be peaceful tomorrow. If we are aware that death can happen at any moment, we start to work on ourselves more constantly, paying attention to the moment-to-moment content of our minds. If you practice being here now, being fully in the moment during your life, if you are living in that space, then the moment of death is just another moment." And Ram Dass also has a quote very similar to that where he says, "For the soul, death is just another moment." And the reason why I think this is speaking to the 5 Remembrances, right? That is saying, And, Vinny was speaking to us about that idea, is that if we turn towards death and we are aware that death can happen at any moment, then it makes us change how we interact with our life in this moment. It makes us pay attention, right? And so, but I also just love that for me, this is what works for me in my own belief system, is for the soul, death is just another moment. And when I first heard that, there was just something I could feel a little bit of the fear around death just let go a little bit around in me. Like, oh yeah, for the soul, death is just another moment.
Yeah, and I love that. I think it was Vinny said it. If you run away from death, you run away from life.
Yeah. That
idea of,
It's just another moment at the top of the ladder, David, apparently.
That's right. That's right.
Well, there's one final one.
You're going to finish us up here, David?
Well, another John O'Donohue.
Okay.
And this is as we enter death. So he writes, I pray that you will have the blessing of being consoled and sure about your death. May you know in your soul that there is no need to be afraid. When your time comes, may you have every blessing and strength you need. May there be a beautiful welcome for you in the home you're going to. You are not going somewhere strange, merely back to the home where you left. May you live with compassion and transfigure everything negative within you and about you. When you come to die, may it be after a long life. May you be tranquil among those who care for you. And may your going be sheltered and your welcome assured, and may your soul smile in the embrace of your Anakim. And we seem to be talking a lot about that, but these are the things, and in a society that doesn't talk about them, the poets and the writers have and offer us a window, I think, or a door in which we can enter these discussions, and I'm thankful for them.
A gentle, peaceful stopping.
Yeah.
Right? That's what I'm getting out of this, that there's a pillowed wall, a gentle, peaceful, if we just take the time to sit down. I mean, I don't know how much I read in trying to be prepared for this tonight, and what I put out one thing and then a blurb of another. I mean, we could probably sit here and read poetry all night, and that probably wouldn't be all that great listening, but this was really peaceful. I found.
Well, I can feel the softening in me as I just sit here and take it in, absorb it.
Good.
So with that, we say goodbye. Is that right?
Yeah, I think we'll say goodbye there.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks for your contributions and this conversation.
Yeah. Take care.
Thank you for listening to What Now? On the Threshold of Life, Death, and Grief. What Now is produced in partnership with Hospice Peterborough, dedicated to providing compassionate care and support to individuals and families facing life-limiting illness and loss. What Now is recorded at Thin Spaces Studio in Peterborough, Ontario. Special thanks to Paradise Garage for providing the music. Technical support is by Sean Heichert, and audio engineering by Kevin Fleming. More episodes of What Now are available for free on most major podcast platforms. If you found value in our conversations, please support us by following the show, leaving a 5-star review, and sharing with your friends and loved ones. If you'd like to support the essential work of Hospice Peterborough, please consider visiting hospicepeterborough.org/donate. Your contribution helps us continue to provide vital care and support. Until next time, may you find peace and comfort on your journey.